Hello, how are you? Today I'm going to talk about a topic that most people don't like to discuss, but a lot of people suffer from, which is intestinal gas. And it's not just a matter of mild physical discomfort. Some people experience abdominal pain, have a harder, bloated belly, can't properly eliminate these gases, or, on the other hand, spend the whole day passing gas uncontrollably, which can even interfere with their social life. This is very embarrassing, and many people ask me, Patricia, is there a way to stop producing so much gas, or at least eliminate them all at once and feel relieved right away? Today I'm going to tell you what really causes this excess gas, what makes it worse, and what actually works. So you're going to love this video. Stay until the end because you won't want to miss it. Before we start, I want to ask you, do you suffer from gas? Is this an issue for you? Do you feel pain or discomfort? There are people who even end up in the hospital thinking they're having a heart attack because of chest pain, since the pressure from the gas is so intense inside the abdominal cavity that it causes referred pain. And you must have known, or at least heard, about these cases. It really can be a very uncomfortable issue. Tell me, do you feel a lot of discomfort like this? Or do you have a lot of gas and release it frequently throughout the day? I would love to see your comment. Remember to like the video, that's very important to me. And every like counts here on the channel. If you know someone who needs this information, who would benefit from it, share this video. Let's expand our chain of kindness. That's what I want here with the channel. So let's start at the beginning. After all, producing gas is normal. It's part of our digestive process. And here's something interesting. I don't know if you know this, but on average, a person can pass gas between 13 and 21 times a day. So the frequency really can be quite high. The problem isn't producing gas. The problem is when it's accompanied by pain, abdominal distension, that feeling of your belly being full of air, hard, where if you tap the side of your stomach, it even makes a sound. Difficulty in being able to pass these gases, and when this starts to impact your life, even in your social routine. Another important point to mention is that not everyone reacts the same way to the same foods. I have to tell you that. For example, there are people who eat beans every day, cabbage, and don't feel anything. And there are people who eat just a small amount and already feel really bad. So as you can see, there's no set recipe, there's no strict rule. In the past, people used to say that the biggest problem was carbohydrates and that they were something really difficult to deal with, especially if you tend to suffer a lot from gas. That's not entirely untrue, but science has already refined this information because the problem isn't the carbohydrate itself, nor the glycemic index, it's the fermentable carbohydrates, which are known as FODMAPs. Nowadays, we know more about this concept because these carbohydrates are not well absorbed in the small intestine. They end up where they shouldn't in the large intestine, and there they are fermented by the bacteria that naturally exist there. So, this fermentation produces gas, bloating, and abdominal pressure. So after all, which foods are richest in FODMAPs? They are beans, chickpeas, lentils, legumes. Does that mean you can't eat legumes? No, a very important tip is to soak your legumes and then discard that water before cooking. That's a classic recommendation that can make a difference. It's something Grandma used to do, but these fermentable compounds will dissolve in the water, and since you won't use that water for cooking, you just throw it away. And afterwards, you can even soak them one more time to make sure you've removed as much as possible. Onion, garlic, and leek are also quite rich. So in this case, you should see what your individual tolerance is and maybe adjust the amount. Cabbage, broccoli, and cauliflower are foods that also naturally have more FODMAPs. Milk and dairy products because of the lactose. When you think about carbohydrates, some people do better when they consume lactose-free varieties, regarding this issue of abdominal bloating. Dehydrated fruits too, and those sweeteners that ferment, like xylitol, sorbitol, mannitol, which are usually found in diet foods, candies, diet chewing gum, or even when someone uses a lot of xylitol for preparing food. Be careful, because these can ferment. What I'm saying here is not that these foods are bad, but that in more sensitive people, they can cause gas. Ideally, you should observe how your own body and your own gut react to these foods and adjust the amount accordingly. Another important detail for you to pay attention to is that carbohydrates, when they ferment in large quantities, can produce more gas and cause more pain, discomfort, and abdominal bloating. So, if you are someone who eats a lot of white bread, white pasta in large quantities, or eats a lot of fruit all at once, concentrated, that large amount of carbohydrate, regardless of the glycemic index, but if it's a carbohydrate that ferments, it can cause more gas for you. That's why many people who start working out and begin eating a lot of bananas or a lot of concentrated fruit in one meal, they often report this issue of intestinal gas. Another important point is to talk about fiber, because we already know that fiber is very important for intestinal health. But we need to make a distinction because there are basically two types of fiber in our diet. Soluble fibers, which are the ones that ferment, and insoluble fibers, which ferment less. So, a practical example, inulin is a fiber that ferments a lot. Where is it usually found? Precisely in those foods I mentioned that ferment more, so you need to be a bit careful with excessive consumption. Psyllium, on the other hand, is a soluble fiber that produces less gas and ferments less. So ideally, you should avoid adding fibers or foods that have a high concentration of soluble fibers to the same meal. For example, beans with broccoli and kale in the same meal. The tendency is for it to ferment more. So the best approach is to try to spread this out throughout the day and preferably choose insoluble fibers, which are fibers that ferment less. Another important point is to talk about the gut microbiota. Because gases don't just come from food, but also from the microorganisms present in our intestines. If we have an imbalance there, an intestinal dysbiosis, an excess of fermenting bacteria, and slow intestinal transit, in other words, if a person is more constipated and drier, the gas gets trapped more easily, ferments more, and causes more pain. In more advanced cases, there may be an excessive bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine, and even chronic constipation can sometimes be associated with this increased gas production and overall imbalance in the gut. Usually, people who are constipated and manage to improve their intestinal transit report feeling less discomfort from gas when their bowel movements become regular. Has this ever happened to you? Tell me about it. In this specific case, a good strategy might be to add more fermented foods. And you might be thinking, my God, but I already have gas, and Patricia wants me to eat fermented foods. But it was fermented outside your body, so it won't cause you gas. What it brings are beneficial yeasts and bacteria to repopulate your gut with foods with less fermentative bacteria, and this can really help you with dysbiosis. Kefir, yogurt, even water kefir if you're lactose intolerant. But remember that other foods like pickles, fermented apples, and fermented pears can also help you a lot. There's a playlist here of homemade natural probiotics. I'll leave it down below in the description for you. Another question people have is about protein consumption and the smell of gas. Mainly eggs and egg white protein. Those are the big ones, right? A lot of people, when they want to eat more eggs or see a nutritionist, end up taking egg white protein supplements. Because it's more economical, there's that joke, my God, now you're going to have a lot of gas with a bad smell. This can actually happen because of the sulfur-containing amino acids that are present, especially in this type of protein, which make the odor stronger. It's not that they're going to ferment more, but the smell of intestinal gas and stool can change. So if you notice this happening to you, you can consider switching to another type of protein, like pea protein, for example, which usually, even in its isolate form, tends to produce less gas for people who are more sensitive. It's not always absolutely necessary, but it is a more advanced option. Among these powdered supplements, the one that usually produces the strongest odor is egg white protein. A lot of people also ask me about this issue with lactose. Since not all lactose intolerance causes explosive diarrhea, that abdominal pain related to diarrhea. Many people may have only partial digestion, so this carbohydrate remains present, ferments a lot, and causes gas, bloating, and delayed distension, which can even occur hours after consuming food with lactose. So if you notice that milk might be involved, you can cut out milk and dairy products for 7 to 10 days, observe, or substitute with lactose-free foods, lactose-free dairy, which usually already improves the situation quite a bit. There are some natural strategies that can help you with this issue of intestinal gas. Peppermint tea is a great option because it relaxes the intestinal muscles. Chamomile has a very interesting antispasmodic effect. It also helps with gas. Ginger speeds up gastric emptying, is antispasmodic, and helps release more gas. So even cooking beans with ginger can be a very interesting option. And physical movement. If you're someone who is constipated, has a lot of gas, a lot of bloating, when you move around, you stimulate more peristalsis and encourage the release of intestinal gases. So it's extremely important to always keep our bodies moving. One very important thing is that if this gas is coming with a lot of abdominal pain, unexplained weight loss without dieting, with no explanation, if you have anemia, if you have progressive and painful bloating, it could be a sign of a more serious problem. So remember that if this has been going on for a long time and is having a big impact on your life, it's always important for you to see a doctor, consult your local nutritionist. Remember that this video is here to help you, but it's purely informational. So remember, if you already have a health problem or are unsure whether you should add any of the options I mentioned, make sure to talk to a professional who assists you in your city. I want to know what you do to help with intestinal gas. I would love to see your comment. Remember to like the video because that's your way of helping me, and to share this video with anyone you think might need it. Let's work together to expand this chain of kindness. That's what I want here with the channel. See you next time. Bye.